The verdant, misty forests of Zoralis stretched endlessly beneath the twin suns, their purple and orange rays piercing through the dense canopy in scattered beams. Dr. Hudson Graves adjusted his breathing apparatus and wiped the condensation from his protective visor. 3 months into his xenobiological survey of this untamed planet, and still every day, brought new wonders that made his scientific heart race. Sampling complete at waypoint 37 need, Hudson spoke into his wrist recorder. Discovered 5 new variations of bioluminescent fungi. Preliminary scans indicate symbiotic relationships with local flora. Fascinating adaptation to low-light conditions beneath the forest canopy. As he packed his collection tools into his field kit, a sound unlike any he'd heard on Zoralis reverberated through the forest, a deep, resonant moan that seemed to carry ancient sorrow within its timbre. Hudson froze his hand instinctively, moving to the stun pistol at his hip. The sound came again, weaker this time, trailing off into what could only be described as a whimper. Something in that sound bypassed Hudson's scientific objectivity and struck a chord of empathy within him. Whatever made that noise was suffering. Diverging from planned route to investigate anomalous vocalization, he recorded already moving toward the sound's origin. Bearing northeast from waypoint 37, the dense undergrowth became increasingly difficult to navigate. Vines with translucent blue leaves wrapped around trees that towered hundreds of feet into the sky. Hudson pushed through a particularly thick cluster of foliage and stumbled into a small clearing, and there his breath caught in his throat. Before him lay a massive creature easily 20 feet long from its broad head to the tip of its thick-scaled tail. Its body was a marvel of evolutionary design, 6 powerfully muscled limbs, an exoskeleton that shimmered with iridescent plates that reminded Hudson of ancient earth beetles, and most remarkably, what appeared to be crystalline growths protruding from its shoulders and spine. But the creature's magnificence was marred by a grievous wound. A jagged gash ran along its side, exposing flesh that pulsed with a luminous blue fluid, blood perhaps, or something analogous to it. The beast's eyes, all 4 of them, positioned in a diamond pattern on its face, slowly turned toward Hudson. They were deep amber pools filled with intelligence and unmistakably pain. The creature made no move to attack or flee. Instead, it seemed to be studying him with weary resignation. Hudson lowered his weapon. "You're hurt," he whispered, knowing the creature couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone might convey his intentions. "I want to help you." He approached cautiously, field medical kit in hand. The creature watched him. Its breathing labored. As Hudson drew closer, he saw the wound in greater detail. The edges were cauterized, suggesting an energy weapon. This wasn't a natural injury. "Someone did this to you," Hudson said quietly. He knelt beside the massive head, maintaining eye contact. "I'm going to try to help. I'm not sure if my supplies will work on your physiology, but I have to try." The creature made a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the ground beneath Hudson's knees. Whether it was a warning or acceptance, he couldn't tell, but he proceeded anyway. His scanner analyzed the creature's blood, and Hudson was astonished to find that its basic cellular structure wasn't entirely dissimilar to Earth mammals, despite its insectoid appearance. "This might work," he muttered, preparing a broad-spectrum biogel that had been developed for emergency field treatment of unknown alien life forms. "But first, I need to clean the wound." As he reached toward the injury with a sterilized cloth, the air behind him displaced with a subtle whoosh. Before he could turn, something cold and sharp pressed against the back of his neck just below his helmet. "Move away from the Korra human," came a voice melodic, even in its threat-speaking flawless English, through what must have been a translation device. "Your kind has done enough damage." Hudson raised his hand slowly. "I'm trying to help. It's wounded. Turn around, slowly." Hudson did as instructed, and found himself facing a humanoid figure whose appearance took his breath away. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, The being before him had skin that resembled polished obsidian with subtle blue undertones. 4 arms extended from a lithe torso, 2 held an elegant weapon that hummed with energy, while the others remained poised for action. The face was angular with features that might be considered beautiful by human standards, though distinctly alien. High cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and eyes that were entirely silver without pupil or iris. Long hair-like tendrils flowed from the being's head, moving as if suspended in water despite the still air. I am Threxia, guardian of the 3rd sacred grove and bond sister to this Korath, the being said, and you are trespassing on consecrated ground. I'm Dr. Hudson Graves, xenobiologist, with the Earth Science Corps, Hudson replied calmly. I was conducting research when I heard your Korath in pain. I only want to help. Threxia's silver eyes narrowed. Humans helped enough when they wounded Korath while hunting for sport. Hudson's eyes widened. Those weren't my people. Our research team has strict non-interference protocols. We're scientists, not hunters. All humans look the same to me, Threxia said coldly. Now leave before... A weak but insistent sound from the Korath interrupted her. The massive creature's eyes were fixed on Hudson, and it made a gesture with one of its front limbs, almost like a beckoning motion. Threxia looked surprised. She lowered her weapon slightly and spoke in a language Hudson couldn't understand, flowing and musical, with clicks and trills impossible for human vocal cords. The Korath responded with a series of low rumbles. After what seemed like a brief argument, Threxia turned back to Hudson, her expression still suspicious, but less overtly hostile. Korath says your energy is different. It senses no malice in you. She paused, conflict evident in her stance. It wishes you to help. Then please let me, Hudson said, gesturing to his medical kit. That wound needs treatment soon. I think my biogel might work on its cellular structure. Threxia hesitated, then stepped aside, though she kept her weapon ready. If you harm Korath further, your death will be neither quick nor painless. Hudson nodded grimly and returned to the wounded creature. With gentle hands, he cleaned the wound, applied the biogel, and sealed it with a bioregenerative mesh. Throughout the procedure, the Korath remained still, its amber eyes never leaving Hudson's face. This should stabilize you for now, Hudson told the creature, patting its exoskeleton gently. The gel will prevent infection and promote cell regeneration, but you'll need rest. As if understanding, the Korath closed its eyes and seemed to relax slightly. The crystalline growths on its body, which had been dull and cloudy, now glimmered with a faint inner light. Threxia had watched Hudson's every move with fierce intensity. Now she approached and knelt beside the Korath, placing one hand on its head in what seemed like an intimate gesture. You surprise me, human, she said without looking at him. Few of your kind would risk themselves for a creature they don't understand. Understanding is exactly what I seek, Hudson replied. That's why I'm here on Zoralis, to learn not to harm. Their conversation was cut short by an ominous rumble that shook the ground. Hudson looked up to see dark clouds gathering with unnatural speed, swirling in violent patterns above the forest canopy. Storm Aurora, Threxia said, alarm evident in her voice. We must seek shelter immediately. These storms bring electrical discharges that can vaporize flesh. What about the Korath? Hudson asked, looking at the massive creature. We can't move it in this condition. Threxia's expression hardened with determination. There is a sacred cavern half a mile east. If we can fashion a travois, perhaps we can drag Korath there. I have something better, Hudson said, activating his wrist communicator. Rover Emergency Protocol 7. Track my location and bring hauling equipment. Minutes later, as the sky darkened ominously and the first crackles of purplish lightning split the air, a 6-wheeled vehicle burst through the undergrowth. Hudson quickly attached the hovering stretcher platform to the beast's underside, creating a gravity-assisted sling. This will take most of Korath's weight off the ground, he explained to an openly impressed Threxia. We just need to guide it. The rover can pull." Together, they secured the wounded Korath and began the treacherous journey through the increasingly violent storm. Wind whipped through the forest carrying stinging particles that forced them to shield their eyes. Lightning struck trees nearby, splitting them asunder and starting small fires that the rain quickly extinguished. By the time they reached the cavern, a massive opening in the side of a cliff face, adorned with strange symbols carved into the rock, all three were exhausted. Once inside, Hudson deployed emergency lighting, while Threxia performed what appeared to be a ritual touching specific symbols on the cave walls that caused them to glow with soft blue light. "We will be safe here," she said, her voice echoing in the vast space. "The sacred chambers repel the storm energy." Hudson nodded gratefully and turned his attention back to the Korath. He was relieved to see that the biogel was working. The creature's wound was already showing signs of healing, the edges drawing together. "Your technology is effective," Threxia acknowledged reluctantly, "though our healing crystals would work better." "I'd love to learn about your healing methods," Hudson said earnestly. "Perhaps we could combine approaches." Threxia studied him for a long moment, her silver eyes unreadable. "Perhaps, but first we must survive the night. The storm will last until morning." As they settled in, Hudson took the opportunity to learn more about his unexpected companions. He discovered that Threxia belonged to a species called the Serani, who had evolved on Zoralis over millions of years. The Korath was not merely an animal, but a sentient being with deep connections to the planet's energy fields, what Threxia called the veins of Zoralis. "Korath and I are bonded," she explained as they shared a small meal of rations from Hudson's pack. "It happened during my coming-of-age ritual when I was barely more than a child. I was lost in the deep wilds, separated from my elders. Korath found me, protected me, brought me home. Since then, our life forces have been intertwined." "That's remarkable," Hudson said, fascinated. "On Earth, we have symbiotic relationships between species, but nothing like what you describe." "It is more than symbiosis," Threxia said, her tone softening as she gazed at the resting Korath. "It is a spiritual connection. Korath is a guardian, one of the ancient protectors of the Relic of Souls." "The Relic of Souls?" Hudson inquired. Threxia looked at him sharply, clearly debating how much to reveal. Finally, she sighed. "It is our most sacred artifact, a remnant from when the first ones walked Zoralis. It contains power that must be protected from those who would misuse it." "And someone is trying to misuse it," Hudson guessed, remembering the Korath's wound. Threxia's expression darkened. "Varric, once my blood brother. He leads a faction that believes the relic should be used as a weapon to extend our influence beyond Zoralis. They attacked the grove, seeking to capture Korath and force a bond to gain access to the sacred chamber where the relic resides." Outside, lightning crashed with increasing intensity, illuminating the cave entrance in strobing flashes. The Korath stirred restlessly, making distressed sounds. "It senses something," Threxia said, suddenly alert. She rose to her feet, weapon in hand. "Something approaches." Hudson grabbed his scanner, adjusting it to maximum range. "Multiple life signs moving fast through the storm. They'll reach us in minutes." Threxia's face hardened. "Varric, he must have tracked us." She turned to Hudson, her silver eyes intense. "Human Dr. Graves, you have shown honor in helping Korath. Now I must ask, will you stand with us? This is not your fight. But if Varric captures the relic, many worlds, perhaps even your Earth, could fall under his dominion." Hudson looked at the wounded Korath, then back at Threxia. In her alien features, he saw courage and integrity that transcended species. His mission had been to observe, not interfere in alien affairs. But sometimes he realized neutrality was just another word for complicity. "I'll stand with you," he said, drawing his stun pistol. "Tell me what to do." Relief flickered across Threxia's face. "We cannot defeat them here. We must move deeper into the caverns, There is a network of tunnels that leads to the sacred chamber. If we can reach it before Varric Korath can activate the relic's defenses. They quickly prepared the injured Korath for movement again. The creature seemed stronger now, able to support more of its own weight. As they ventured deeper into the cave system, the walls changed from rough stone to intricately carved panels depicting scenes from what Hudson assumed was Shirani history battles, ceremonies, and recurring images of creatures like Korath standing alongside humanoid figures. Your people have a rich history with the Korath, Hudson observed as they moved. They have been our companions since before we built cities, Threxia confirmed. They guided us from primitive tribes to the civilization we have today. The bond between Shirani and Korath is sacred, which makes Varric's actions all the more blasphemous. The sounds of pursuit grew closer, shouted commands in the Shirani language, the clatter of equipment. Their path led them to a chasm that cut across the cavern floor too wide to jump. A narrow stone bridge arched across it, barely wide enough for one person. Korath cannot cross that, Hudson said, looking at the massive creature. It must, Threxia insisted. The bridge will hold. It was built by the first ones. Hudson looked dubious, but they had no choice. One by one, they began crossing Threxia first, then guiding the hesitant Korath, with Hudson bringing up the rear. The bridge held, though it groaned under the Korath's weight. They were halfway across when the first energy blast struck the cave wall near them. Hudson turned to see a group of Shirani warriors emerging from the tunnel behind them, led by a figure whose obsidian skin was marked with red ceremonial scars. Varric, Threxia hissed. Beloved Threxia. The scarred Shirani called his voice almost gentle, despite the weapon in his hands. Still running with your pet. And now you've found a human pet as well. How delightful. The relic is not meant to be a weapon, Varric, Threxia shouted back. You know this. Our ancestors were fools who squandered the power of the gods, Varric interrupted. The humans and a dozen other species spread across the stars while we remain confined to Zoralis, all because of outdated taboos. He raised his weapon again. Now return the Korath to me, and I may let your human live. Instead of answering, Threxia fired her own weapon. The energy blast struck near Varric, forcing him and his warriors to take cover. Run, she shouted to Hudson. Get Korath across. What followed was a desperate race across the bridge under fire. Hudson used his stun pistol to provide covering fire, though its range and power were limited compared to the Shirani weapons. Threxia fought with the skill of a trained warrior, her forearms allowing her to both attack and defend simultaneously. They had nearly reached the other side when a blast hit the bridge's edge. Stone crumbled beneath Hudson's feet, and he felt himself falling. In a flash of movement, almost too fast to track, Korath's tail whipped out, wrapping around Hudson's waist and pulling him to safety. Once across, Threxia activated a mechanism that caused a section of the bridge to collapse, temporarily halting their pursuers. But they all knew it would only buy them minutes. Thank you, Hudson said to the Korath, placing a hand on its massive head. The creature made a rumbling sound that vibrated pleasantly through Hudson's palm. It seems the bond goes both ways now. Threxia observed a note of wonder in her voice. Korath has accepted you. They pressed on deeper into the cavern system. The passages became increasingly elaborate, with luminous crystals embedded in the walls providing light. Hudson noticed that these crystals resembled the growths on Korath's body. The crystals in Korath, they're connected somehow, he asked. Threxia nodded. The crystals are conduits for the planet's energy. The Korath can channel this energy, use it. It is why they are guardians of the relic. Finally, they reached a vast circular chamber with a domed ceiling that seemed to capture and amplify the light from the crystals, creating an ethereal glow. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it, a small object that defied Hudson's scientific understanding. Neither solid nor liquid, it shifted and flowed, glowing with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The relic of souls, Threxia said reverently. The Korath moved forward, drawn to the relic. As it approached, the crystalline growths on its body began to glow brighter, resonating with the relic's pulsing light. What happens now? Hudson asked quietly. Korath will activate the relic's protection, Threxia explained. It will create a barrier that Varric cannot penetrate. But before the Korath could reach the pedestal, the chamber's entrance exploded inward. Varric and his warriors poured through, weapons raised. Stop them, Varric commanded. Energy blasts filled the air. Hudson and Threxia took cover behind ancient stone columns, returning fire when possible. The wounded Korath, despite its injuries, positioned itself between the attackers and the relic, its massive body absorbing blasts meant for the artifact. Korath needs to reach the relic, Threxia shouted over the chaos. We must create a diversion. Hudson nodded grimly. I'll draw their fire to the left. You go right. They split up, each becoming a target for Varric's warriors. Hudson's scientific training hadn't prepared him for combat, but adrenaline and determination made up for his lack of experience. He managed to stun 2 warriors before taking a glancing hit to his shoulder that spun him to the ground. Through pain-blurred vision, he saw Threxia engaged in close combat with Varric himself. Despite her skill, she was being driven back. The Korath, seeing its bond partner in danger, roared and charged toward them. No, Hudson shouted, realizing what would happen. The relic first. But the Korath's protective instincts overrode strategy. It barreled into Varric, sending him flying across the chamber. The reprieve gave Threxia the chance to dispatch 2 more warriors, but more kept coming. Hudson forced himself to his feet, clutching his injured shoulder. He staggered toward the relic, understanding what needed to be done. If the Korath wouldn't go to the relic, he would bring the relic to the Korath. Varric saw his intention and shouted a command. All enemy fire redirected toward Hudson. Threxia screamed a warning, but Hudson kept moving, zigzagging toward the pedestal. Time seemed to slow as he reached the relic. Up close, it was even more mesmerizing, a swirling nexus of energy that seemed to contain galaxies within its small form. Without thinking, Hudson grasped it. Pain and pleasure exploded through his body simultaneously. Images flooded his mind. The history of Seralis I. Once, the bond between Serani and Korath, all compressed into seconds of overwhelming insight. Hudson staggered toward the Korath, the relic clutched in his hands. Energy blasts sizzled past him, one grazing his leg and sending him stumbling. But before he could fall, Threxia was there supporting him, her 4 arms creating a protective cage around him as they moved. Together, they reached the Korath. Hudson pressed the relic against the creature's crystal growths. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Light erupted from the connection, expanding outward in a shockwave that knocked everyone off their feet. The Korath's crystals blazed like miniature suns, and its wounded body began to transform. The injury closed completely. The exoskeleton became more vibrant, and its amber eyes glowed with renewed strength. When the light faded, the Korath stood tall and powerful. It turned toward Varric and his remaining warriors, who were struggling to regain their footing. The creature opened its mouth and emitted not a roar, but a focused sonic blast that sent the attackers flying back through the entrance they had destroyed. Varric alone remained protected by some personal energy shield. He looked at the empowered Korath with a mixture of fear and awe. This isn't over, he declared, backing toward the exit. The relic belongs to all Shirani, not just the traditionalists. We will return. And we will be waiting, Threxia replied, standing tall beside the Korath, one hand on Hudson's good shoulder. After Varric retreated, Threxia turned her attention to Hudson's injuries. Using a combination of Shirani healing crystals and his own medical supplies, she treated his wounds while the Korath stood guard. You risked your life for a world not your own, she said softly as she worked. Few would show such courage. Hudson winced as she applied a crystal to his shoulder. It felt right. Sometimes science isn't just about observing. It's about protecting what's valuable. The Korath approached, lowering its massive head to eye level with Hudson. It made a series of gentle rumbling sounds, then touched its forehead to his in a gesture that felt profoundly intimate. "It has marked you as Shirani friend," Threxia explained, her voice filled with emotion. "The highest honor for an outsider." In that moment, surrounded by alien wonders and faced with new discoveries that would revolutionize human understanding of sentient life, Hudson realized that he had crossed a threshold. He was no longer merely an observer of Zoralis. He had become part of its story. The days that followed were filled with revelations. The relic, temporarily dormant after its activation, revealed more of its secrets through the Korath's connection. Hudson learned that it was not merely a power source, but a repository of consciousness, the combined wisdom of ancient Korath, who had sacrificed their physical forms to create a legacy for future generations. Through a form of telepathic communion facilitated by the Korath, Hudson experienced fragments of Zeralis's history. The arrival of the first ones, the uplifting of the primitive Shirani, the formation of the sacred bond between species, and the creation of the relic to ensure that balance would be maintained. The relic could heal worlds, he marveled to Threxia, as they sat beside a luminous pool deep within the cavern system. Not just individuals, but entire ecosystems. Yes, Threxia agreed, but it could also destroy them if misused. That is why the Guardians exist, to ensure the power is used wisely, if at all. Their conversation was interrupted by a communication alert from Hudson's wrist device. The Earth Science Corps had been searching for him since the storm. "Dr. Graves." "Thank heavens," came the relieved voice of his expedition leader. "We've been looking everywhere. Are you injured? Do you need extraction?" Hudson glanced at Threxia, whose expression had grown guarded. "I'm fine, Professor. Better than fine, actually. I've made first contact with an indigenous sentient species, the Sirani, and I've discovered something that could change everything we thought we knew about interspecies relationships." There was a stunned silence then. "Hudson, this is unprecedented. The Galactic Council will need to be informed immediately. Stay where you are. We're sending a diplomatic team to your location." After the communication ended, Threxia looked troubled. "More humans. Are you certain this is wise?" Hudson took her hand, a gesture they had both grown comfortable with over their days together. "Trust goes both ways. Your people kept the relic's secret to protect it, but isolation has its own dangers, as Varric's rebellion shows. Perhaps it's time for Zoralis to have allies among the stars." The meeting between the Earth diplomatic team and the Shirani Council of Elders was tense at first. Centuries of isolation had made the Shirani suspicious of outsiders. But the presence of Hudson, now formally recognized as Shirani friend, and the testimony of Threxia helped bridge the cultural divide. The revelation of the relic's existence caused initial alarm among the human representatives. Such power could destabilize the fragile peace maintained by the Galactic Council. But when the Korath demonstrated the relic's true purpose by healing a blighted section of forest that had been dying for decades, transforming it into a lush paradise in minutes, perspectives shifted. "The relic is not a weapon," Hudson explained to the assembled representatives of both species. "It's a tool of balance of healing. Yes, it could be weaponized just as any advanced technology can be, but its true purpose is restoration." The negotiations lasted weeks, but eventually, a historic accord was reached. The humans would help the Shirani defend against Varric's separatist faction, which had gone into hiding. In return, the Shirani would share their understanding of the bond between species and the healing properties of their crystal's knowledge that could revolutionize medicine throughout known space. As for the relic itself, an unprecedented solution was proposed. 2 guardians would be appointed to oversee its use, 1 Shirani and 1 human. Threxia was the obvious choice for her people. And despite his lack of diplomatic experience, Hudson was unanimously selected by the Earth representatives. "You've already proven you can work with the Serani," the Earth ambassador told him. "And more importantly, the Korath has accepted you. That bond is irreplaceable." On the final day of negotiations, as the formal treaty was signed, Hudson stood with Threxia and the Korath on a cliff overlooking the vast forests of Zoralis. The twin suns were setting, casting the landscape in shades of gold and purple. "I never imagined my research expedition would end like this," Hudson said, watching a flock of flying creatures dance through the evening sky. Guardian of an alien relic, diplomatic liaison to a newly discovered species, and bond partner to a Serani warrior, Threxia added softly, her silver eyes meeting his. Their relationship had evolved naturally over their time together, crossing the boundaries of species with the same ease that they had crossed the chasm in the caverns, carefully at first, then with growing confidence. What had begun as mutual respect had deepened into something neither of them had words to describe. That most of all, Hudson agreed, taking her hand. The Korath made a rumbling sound that both of them had come to recognize as approval. Its amber eyes watched them with what could only be described as affection. "We face challenges ahead," Threxia said, turning her gaze to the horizon. "Varric still has supporters. Some of my people fear change. Some of yours may covet the relic's power. And we'll face them together," Hudson replied, "just as we did in the cavern." The Korath suddenly raised its head, crystals glowing with a soft blue light. It made a series of sounds that Threxia translated with a smile. "It says that healing the ancient pain of one allows for the healing of many," she told Hudson. "I think it's talking about itself, and perhaps about all of us." As night fell over Zoralis, the three figures remained on the cliff, human Jirani and Korath, silhouetted against the emerging stars. They were no longer separate entities, but a trinity forged in adversity and united in purpose. And somewhere in the vastness above them, both danger and opportunity awaited the next chapter in a story that would span worlds. The starlight caught the crystalline growths on the Korath's body, making them shimmer like beacons in the darkness, a promise between the stars, a bridge across the void, a testament to the power of healing touch across the boundaries of worlds.